form of Vishnu, Vam, unto both of you, Darshitam, has been shown. Rupam, my form is the Supreme Personality of Godhead with 4 hands. Pratjanma, of my previous appearances. Smaranaya, just to remind you. May, my, not. Anyata, otherwise. Matbhavam, Vishnu's appearance. Jnanam, this transcendental knowledge. Marchalingena, by taking birth like a human child. Jayate, does arise. Translation. I have shown you this form of Vishnu just to remind you of my previous births. Otherwise, if I appeared like an ordinary human child, you would not believe that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, has indeed appeared. So, let's get rid of the ants. You can repeat. I have shown you this form of Vishnu. Just to remind you of my previous births. Otherwise, if I appeared like an ordinary human child, you would not believe that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, has indeed appeared. So, purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki. Devaki did not need to be reminded that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, had appeared as her son. She already accepted this. Nonetheless, she was anxious, thinking that if her neighbors heard that Vishnu had appeared as her son, none of them would believe it. Therefore, she wanted Lord Vishnu to transform himself into a human child. On the other hand, the Supreme Lord was also anxious, thinking that if he appeared as an ordinary child, she would not believe that Lord Vishnu had appeared. Such are the dealings between devotees and the Lord. The Lord deals with his devotees exactly like a human being, but this does not mean that the Lord is one of the human beings. For this is the conclusion of non-devotees avajananti mam muta manushim tanam ashritam. Devotees know the Supreme Personality of Godhead under any circumstances. This is the difference between a devotee and a non-devotee. The Lord says, Manmana bhavamad bhakto madhyajimam namaskuru. Engage your mind always in thinking of me, become my devotee, offer obeisances, and worship me. A non-devotee cannot believe that simply by thinking of one person, one can achieve liberation from this material world and go back home, back to Godhead. But this is a fact. The Lord comes as a human being, and if one becomes attached to the Lord on the platform of loving service, one's promotion to the transcendental world is assured. So, etanvam dashitam rupam prajnanma smaranaya me nanyata madbhavam jnanam marcha lingena jayate. So, Om Ganati Madandasha Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshur So Prabhupada says something very interesting in this purport, that the Lord is in anxiety. I find that quite interesting. It says, the Supreme Lord was also anxious, thinking that if he appeared as an ordinary child, she would not believe that Lord Vishnu had appeared. So, anxiety is a type of fear. And even we understand from the Bhagavad Gita, the chapter of divine and demoniac nature, Abhaya Sattva Samshuddhi Jnana Yoga Yogastati. a devotee, someone who's cultivating knowledge, first quality is abhaya. Abhaya means freedom of fear, freedom from anxiety. So, before we start talking about why the Supreme Lord was anxious, let's talk about why devotees get anxious. Because Krishna says, shouldn't be any anxiety. Yet, somehow or other we find, for example, with Srila Prabhupada, that when Srila Prabhupada was thinking of the devotees, he was sometimes anxious, especially, there's actually two stories that come to mind. One story is when he sent Tamal Krishna Maharaj to buy the land in Sridham Mayapur, and he sent Tamal Krishna Maharaj with all that money wrapped in a... Ooh, it's quiet. You can hear the crickets. So, wrapped in sort of like an improvised money belt. Just had a piece of cloth, and he wrapped it not like our modern day money belts that everybody looks for when they want to steal things from the devotees in Sri Vrindavana. They call the devotees blue belts, because that means they keep their money in the belt. Anyway, so don't do that. So anyway, so Prabhupada was in anxiety. He was up at night, pacing back and forth, waiting for Tamal Krishna Maharaj to come back. And finally, in the middle of the night, Tamal Krishna Maharaj comes back, and he says to Srila Prabhupada, this land is yours. And Prabhupada's happy, relieved of his anxiety. And then he sends Tamal Krishna Maharaj, all right, go take prasadam and take rest. So one instance of Prabhupada's anxiety. Another instance that comes to mind is the negotiations over the Bombay or Mumbai property in Juhu, where Prabhupada was not only in anxiety, he was angry at one particular point. He was angry because this Mr. Nair had somehow or other confused the devotees, and the devotees had negated the sales contract. Tamal Krishna Maharaj had done that. And he wrote Prabhupada, Prabhupada is not practical, we've negated the sales contract. Prabhupada got really angry at that particular point. He was in anxiety and anger. So, how is this? Because, we hear from the Bhagavad Gita that 3 gates, doorways lead to hell, lust, anger, greed. Prabhupada was also asking for more and more books to be distributed. And it's described about someone who's in the mode of passion, or a demon, so much wealth do I have today, so much more will I have tomorrow. He's my enemy, I have conquered him. And then Prabhupada, let me just look at these different examples. When Prabhupada actually won the whole battle in Mumbai, it was like I have conquered him, And the devotees were actually, just like in a mundane football game, where people are recounting the different plays in the game. I don't know if any of you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, I really got him there, or football. I don't even know what football is. I also basketball. I threw the ball all the way from the other end of the court and went in the hoop, and we won the game. They're rejoicing like that. So in the same way, while they were having the party, they were recounting. And even when Prabhupada was in Vrindavan later on, he was recounting, if you read the biography of Prabhupada, he and the devotees were recounting, even before Prabhupada left the planet, recounting these glorious victories. So it's interesting. You have a type of transcendental greed, like Prabhupada said, you could take a picture of him raking in the money, whereas another Mayavadi sannyasi said you had a picture of him pushing away money, anxiety, all these different things. So we have to be able to distinguish between spiritual anxiety and material anxiety. Because we generally think, or not we, but people generally think in a utopian way about the spiritual world, about spirituality. Utopian means basically there's no anxiety, there's no distress, everybody's just agreeing. It's like a big kumbaya, or like the Walt Disney World. You know, it's a small world, isn't it? All these little puppets. Anyone's seen that? No one's seen it. All these little puppets. I remember went on that ride with Jack Patakamars once. And we were holding hands. Anyway, so it's a small world, isn't it? It's just like you feel really warm and fuzzy inside. Well, we have this conception of spiritual life that it's just warm and fuzzy all the time. But it's not, because love means all these different emotions. In the material world, lust, you experience different emotions, anxiety, you know. Oh, what about the stock market? Just like sometimes I speak to my mother, and she invests heavily in the stock market. And so she always brags to me when the market is up, how she invested in Starbucks before they became Starbucks. She saw a little coffee cart on the street in Seattle and asked them, you know, what are you? And they said, we're Starbucks. And she invested, she made a fortune. Anyway, and so when it's going up, she's exalted, happy, ecstatic, whatever you may call it. Of course, Prabhupada always, I was listening to Prabhupada this morning, he said, the material world is always miserable. So even your ecstasy is misery. So, and then when it goes down, she says, I don't know what I'm going to do, the market's going down, like that. Yeah, it's just so much anxiety, but it's not spiritual. So one has to be ready to take anxiety in spiritual life. It's not utopian. It's not that everybody always agrees with each other. You know, that would be crazy if everyone always agreed with it. It's the most boring experience you can imagine in the spiritual world. You know, there's competition, there's spiritual envy, there's trickery, there's all these things. It makes life fun. That's the spiritual world. Because where there's love, there has to be all those things. Where there's self-centeredness, you just want to escape all those things. So in serving Krishna, one has to be ready to take the anxiety to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So anyways, that's one point. But the point I really want to talk about today was how the Lord is in anxiety. Because we generally hear, not only generally, we always hear, or usually hear, or sometimes hear, how the Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita, as a Supreme Personality of Godhead, I know everything, past, present, and future. This is interesting. He knows everything. How could you be in anxiety if you know everything? How everything's going to happen, isn't it? If you could predict everything, expert astrologer, Sarvagya, it means knower of everything, then it'd just be, all right, World War III is happening in a few minutes. Stock market's going up, invest in the stock market. That would be great, actually. I'd love to have that ability. So anyway, so Krishna knows everything. So how can you be in anxiety? Because anxiety means you don't know what's going to happen. And we see this in many instances, not just here that Krishna's in anxiety. I was thinking of Gopakumar's situation in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita. Gopakumar, of course, is a coward boy, and he encounters his spiritual master. And Krishna reveals to him, when he finally goes back to the spiritual world, Krishna reveals to him that I was in anxiety about you, thinking, when is he coming back to me? Even though Krishna knows and knew when Gopakumar was going to come back to him, Sarupa, that was his spiritual identity. Still, Krishna was in anxiety. And then when he finally comes back to the spiritual world, then Krishna is relieved, which is even more interesting. Krishna just faints in ecstasy. Wow, you finally came back. Oh, I was missing you. And it's also interesting, how are you missing him? You're in his heart. These are very interesting exchanges between the devotee and Krishna. And this is the exchange of love. Because as it's stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Sadhavo Riyam Mayam Sadhanam Riyam Tvam Maranyat Tena Janati Naham Tebyo Managapi. Krishna says, I am in the hearts of the sadhus. And he says, also in a reciprocal way, because this also verifies what Krishna says in the Gita, Yeyatam mam prapajante tam sataiva bhajamaham mamavartman vartate manushapartha sarvashad. Sometimes that verse is as they surrender to me, but as they reciprocate with me, I reciprocate with them. That's really a direct translation of that verse. So Krishna says, I also have the sadhus in my heart. Pretty good. And because they, now continuing with that verse, because they do not know anyone else other than me as theirs. In other words, their whole existence is just like an anxiety to please Krishna. And so Krishna's whole existence, this is love, is an anxiety to please his devotees. Wow. Because that's love. I mean, how can there be loving exchange if Krishna just says, I know he's my devotee, he's supposed to do that, he loves me. Okay. Hare Krishna. I don't know if he says Hare Krishna, but anyway. Just Krishna's whole life would be boring. And it's not just, you could say, well, it's just Yogamaya. That's an easy explanation. Yeah, because Krishna wants to enjoy, he just has this Yogamaya so he can enjoy. Yes, that is true. But what is that Yogamaya? Because Maya means energy. Yeah, but it's Krishna's energy. But that Yogamaya is the energy of bhakti, of love. So in other words, Krishna is overwhelmed with love, and therefore he forgets. Not that Krishna forgets, and therefore he's overwhelmed with love. Do you understand the difference? Because he's overwhelmed with love for his devotee, and for everyone basically, he forgets. And you see this in this material world too. When someone is overwhelmed with love, I mean, whether it's romantic love or love for one's child or something, you actually forget about everything else. Just like Prabhupada gave the example, was it Kennedy or something, that he was playing with little John, that was his son. And there was some ambassador or some dignitary who was waiting to see him. And his secretary said to the ambassador, just wait outside, he'll see you, he's engaged in an important conversation, an important meeting or something important. And the ambassador just looks in the crack in the door and he sees the President of the United States playing, piggyback ride or something like that. Why do we call it piggyback ride? Anyway, giving his, that's a horrible thing. I'm not even going to use that expression anymore. Piggyback, just giving his son a ride on his back. So, because out of love, he's just forgetting his duties as the most important man on the earth planet. Of course, most important political man, probably the most important person on the earth at that particular point. So, because out of love. That's really, I was trying to understand this, what is Yogamaya? It's actually Krishna's energy of love. Wow. And then, that's why Krishna says in the Adi Purana, one who says he is my devotee is not my devotee, but one who says a devotee is my devotee is my devotee. Because this is how Krishna functions. Sometimes people say God is love, but that's not really complete. God is He who is loving. And sometimes His love in this material world is manifested in such a way that you wish it didn't manifest in that way. You know, I hear this from people all the time when someone says, well, I was praying to Krishna that this wouldn't happen or this would happen, and it didn't happen or it did happen, and you know, what's happening? But Krishna just loves you so much that He just wants you back. That's why there's that other verse, you know, Yashaham anugrinami harishye taddanam shanai. For with those who I especially favor, I take everything away. Their friend, like Prabhupada mentioned this so far as his own life. He said their friends and relatives reject him, and they just have to take shelter of Hare Krishna. And they're, you know, what I speak, your body even rejects you. Or your youth is gone, you know, just, oh my God. All my hopes and expectations and desires. Oh my God. Oh my Krishna. So, and that's why Krishna has arranged old age in the material world, arranged the threefold miseries. They're all manifestations of Krishna's love for us, to actually bring us back to Him as soon as possible. So anyway, so this is my understanding of this particular verse about the Lord, statement by Srila Prabhupada, about the Lord being an anxiety to make sure that Devaki knows you got God here. Because in general, in those days, God meant Lord Vishnu. That was their understanding. You have to understand the social context or the cultural context then. Like different cultures, they have different understandings of God. Of course, as we know, God has many different forms, comes down many different times, many different incarnations. So people have different understandings. So in the Western world, people understand God a little bit differently. I mean, obviously, probably in Christianity, they probably want to see an old man with a beard or something like that. Can you imagine that? You know, to assure you that God is there, there's this old man with a beard. So whatever they're, you know, Jesus Christ would have to be the representative of God. So there's different ways to assure people according to their cultural context. In Devaki's cultural context, it's Lord Vishnu with 4 arms. And so Lord Vishnu is thinking, that's the way I'm going to assure her everything will be all right. I don't want her to be an anxiety. And that's Lord Vishnu's love. So anyway, so see, these are some of the points. Any questions, comments, or other points? Yeah.
Interesting, in the word for word.
Yeah.
That the last line actually, what Prabhupada refers to as, Marjalingena Jayate. Marjalingena means the form that dies.
Yeah.
So that human life is the form that dies. So he's appearing as a human being in a sense that people, you know, that's the form that has limitations. You know, it's very, very personal. I mean, it's so that the non-devotees, they can't understand that. How is it possible that God can appear in a form that, quote, dies?
Yeah, well, the form doesn't die.
Of course it doesn't, but it has that appearance.
Has the appearance.
Yeah.
Has the appearance. And that's also to bewilder the atheist, too.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Like you have that story, the Moshe Leela, where Krishna disappeared from this world. And in fact, Prabhupada said he left it like a replica body. Devotees don't like to tell that story, of course. That Krishna apparently got shot in the foot by the hunter, Jara, and that hunter was Brigamuni previously. Because Brigamuni had made this big offense, one of his many offenses, of kicking the Lord in the chest, and the hunter shot Krishna in the foot, thinking the foot was a deer. And then Krishna just like ascended or left, and he left something there, something composed of earth, water, fire, air, the Panchamahabhuta elements. And that was to bewilder the atheists. And of course, Prabhupada also quotes this verse, Avajananti Mamuda, Manushin Tanamashritam. That that for those who are mudas, those who are asses, they consider Krishna's form to be material in this world. So Krishna gives them that improper intelligence and understanding due to their mogasha moga karmano, moga yana vichestasaha, because of their envy.
So Krishna, he's able
Another verse, let me just finish another verse. Naham prakasha sarvasya yogamaya samavrita. Another verse is mudayam nabijanati, the same word muda. Because they're so foolish, I cover them with my bewildering energy. Naham prakasha, they will never understand. Naham prakasha sarvasya yogamaya samavrita. So
he accomplishes everything in one act.
Yeah, in one act. In one act. That he's just bewildering people by his apparent human form, and he's also assuring Devaki, by appearing as Vishnu, that I'm God, don't worry about it. But she already knows he's God. And Krishna should already know that she knows what's going on here. It's just like a mother will reassure a child. The child knows the mother will take care of her or him. But the mother just goes on, keeps reassuring out of love. So you see this very intimate, deep, loving exchange between Devaki and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, going on here. Even though Krishna knows that she knows. But he's thinking, what if she doesn't know? But he knows that she knows. He's in her heart. He knows everything. He knows what's going to happen next. But out of love, he forgets it. And that's my definition of Yogamaya, which is Krishna's love. And the devotees' love, too. Devotees love Krishna so much that their love overcomes their understanding. Like I mentioned, we have in the material world. If a man and woman love, that overcomes their understanding of the responsibilities. Unfortunately. So, any other questions? Yes. Susanna.
Make a comment. Utopia really in Greek means
No place.
What?
Utopia.
Utopia means no place.
No place.
Wow.
Doesn't exist.
That's interesting. But the general understanding in English of utopia is where everybody's just smiling at each other and there's no arguments or no problems between each other. I'm taking the common understanding of the word utopia. It's just but Prabhupada said there's no utopia even in the spiritual world. There's differences of opinion. That's what makes it interesting. If everybody agreed, it's just yuck. Yeah. What is that? There's a word in English for that. Anyway, I forget the word. Where everyone just agrees and it's just completely boring and you just want to get the hell out of there. So, any other questions or comments? Krishna Priya, you had something.
I just had a question. It's a little bit, it's related to this, but it's not from this particular verse, but I've been wondering. We see that Devaki, she's there with Krishna in Mathura, and we're seeing, that she knows that Krishna's God, but because we're speaking, what is reciprocation? Then we see that Yashoda, she's there in Vrindavan, and she doesn't see Krishna as being God, it's her loving Krishna. So my question is, what is the speciality of this position of Rohini, that she's able to be in Mathura, in those pastimes, and then she's able to enter into
Vrindavan, too. That's a very special position. Yep, that's a very special position. And I guess outside of Vrindavan, she's switching moods. Because obviously she's aware that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But when she goes to Vrindavan, she's not aware that Balaram, her son, and Krishna are the Supreme Person. They're both the same person, but anyway, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He switches moods out of love. Just like Krishna, he switches moods when he goes to different places too. When he's in Mathura, the mood is not quite so intimate. Although this is quite intimate being described here, but not like the intimacy in Vrindavan. And when he goes to Vrindavan, he's just like, forget about this God business. Except when he has to kill the demons. Then he expands, as Vishnu expansions, to kill the demons. But otherwise, just forget about this God business. But here, in one sense, he's not really forgetting about his God business here. Except he's in anxiety. That's why he manifests himself as Vishnu. But when you have, in Vrindavan, Krishna manifests himself as actually the source of all the material and spiritual world, and Yashoda looks into his mouth and sees all the planets like that. He's not happy with that particular exchange. Here he's happy with the exchange of showing him he's God. In Vrindavan, he's not happy showing he's God. There's a difference. In Vrindavan, she starts to think, oh, he's God, whatever, my Father in heaven. My Father is all the heavens, but whatever it is. And then Krishna thinks that this is not nice. But here Krishna is thinking this is nice. So it's a different mood. Okay. Let's see. Govind.